Hi, welcome everyone to Intro2Astro 2026. This is our 6-week long workshop into astronomy research. My name is Dr. Fei Dai. I'm a faculty member at the University of Hawaii, and I specialize in finding exoplanets, which are planets outside our solar system. So you'll learn about exoplanet in this course. Um, so as you can see, we have many participants. Please mute yourself, and we probably don't have time for self-introduction, but feel free to get into contact with us through email after the class. Today we'll cover two topics, which is Unix, GitHub, some of the basic coding environment thing with Alexandra, and we'll move on to talking about science papers with Maria Vincent. There will be homework for these two parts that will be posted via email. And please find some time to complete it this week and post your results on our shared Google Drive, which I'll share after the live session. Yeah, so at the end of the workshop, if you have completed all the homework, we'll provide you with a certificate of participation. But again, that is contingent on you completing all the homework. Okay, before we start, any questions? Now it's time to unmute yourself if you have any questions. All right, if not, maybe we can move on to the first topic, which will be presented by Alexandra, who's undergraduate student in Mexico, and she was one of our participants last year too. So it's all yours, Alexandra.
Well, good evening, morning, whatever you are, everyone. I'm Alejandra. I'll be presenting. Give me a sec to share my screen. There we go. Can you see it all right?
Yes.
Okay, let's go ahead. First, we're going to talk about the Unix operating system, since this is the basis of most of the interaction we're going to have with coding and computers, at least in STEM and in science. Unix was the first portable operating system. That means software that manages your hardware and software so that your computer can do some work for you. Nowadays, macOS is based on Unix, and Linux distributions are also Unix-like, so they work similarly. Now, to interact with Unix, we use the shell. We input commands into the shell so that the operating system will do some work for us. There are many shells, but the most common shell is the born again shell known as bash, and it's found everywhere basically. Now, to communicate with this shell, we use a terminal. We type opposed to pressing buttons like we are normally used to. We type commands into this terminal. In a program or maybe in a Jupyter notebook, we can also type commands, and the terminal will provide some output for us.
So sorry to interrupt, Alexandra. Maybe for everyone, if you have your computer with you, it's time to pull up a terminal and try some of these commands too.
Yes, we're going to talk about some commands. Actually, now in Linux and in macOS, you should have a terminal pre-installed. And I hope you received an email earlier last week, I think, with instructions for installing WSL on Windows. So please take some time to open it up now, since we're going to start going into some examples. All right. First, the terminal is actually super simple. I know it can be really scary if you've never used it. At least it was quite scary for me since the first time I used it. It's like in the movies. But it's extremely simple. You just type a command, and then you can add some flags to modify that command, and it will just provide you whatever that command is supposed to do. First, we'll go through how we should navigate our files. I'm gonna show you how to use these commands, but we're gonna go over them first. First is the cd command, which means change directory. We just tell it where we're going, like change directory to the location, and we can also use it to go forward and back through some folders. ls then can type for us a list of all the files in our directory, and we can add a flag that means this dash here, and an A to show us hidden files. There are many flags, and every command has special different flags. You shouldn't try to just memorize this, like studying them. There are way too many commands and way too many flags. You should just use them, learn them, and you'll slowly memorize them as you use them. Okay, I'm gonna show you here an example. I'm in a folder deep into my files called example. ls will show us what files I have here. I have two files. One is called file1.txt, and I have a folder which is called foodir. We can go into this folder with the cd command. And now we're inside foodir. This folder, however, is empty. Let's go back. Now I want to see if I have any hidden files here. We add the -a so that I can see them. We can see here these dots. This means the current directory and the parent directory, just like I did up here. To go back to our parent directory, that means the folder that contains whichever folder we are currently in. And we have a hidden file here, hidden file.txt. Let's keep going. Now, creating files. We can create a folder or a directory, as they're called in Linux, with mkdir, which means make directory. And we can create any type of file with touch. I'm going to be using txt files for these examples, but you can make Python files, Word documents, etc. For modifying directly in the terminal, coding and text files are, well, mostly supported, but other types of files might need extra programs. Let's go over for an example. We can make a second file. We should do touch file2. We are supposed to type the name and the file type here. And now we can see here, we have a second file. Now, most terminals come with a command called nano, which let us type stuff into our files. Here we can type whatever we want. And we save it with yes. And now we have some text in our file. Now, how do we actually get to see this text? No, I think that's further ahead actually. Yeah. But we can print this with the command cat. Now, on deleting files and deleting directories, you should be careful with these commands, since this isn't like sending them to the recycle bin. They will be gone for real. So you have to really think about what you're trying to delete and be careful when you type these commands. You use rm, which means remove, to delete any file, or empty directories, you use the remove directory, I'll show you. -r is for deleting directories that are filled with files, because remove directory only works for empty directories. We can also copy files and move files with cp and mv. Let's go for an example. Now we can, for example, remove first. Let's make a directory. So let me, here you can use clear to delete commands so that you have a clear space to keep working. We can remove an empty directory with dir, and now it's gone. Now let's remove file 1. And there, just like that, it's gone. It's for real gone. It's not in the recycle bin. I cannot get it back, so you gotta be careful. Now let's go into footer and make another file here. And now if I try to remove this directory, I'm gonna get an error because it is a directory. And even if I try to remove it with this, it won't let me because it is not empty. So we gotta go remove recursive, and now it will delete it. Now we can do some copying. Now, all right, we gotta tell it where we're gonna put this copy since. So let's actually make a new directory and copy this to our new directory. Now we can go into this new directory and see that here we have this copy of our file number 2. We can also make a new directory. And let's now move this parent file 2 over here. Let's go into directory 4 and we'll find our moved file. Now, I already showed you how you use cat. Let's just show it again. It prints the contents of any file. It can be code. It can be just plain text like this file. And it'll show you the content directly on our terminal here. Now we can also use wildcards. Right now I have been having to write the full name of everything I'm being trying to tell here, but we can actually be quicker if we use the wildcards. For example, I can print here, but say I don't want to write the whole name of this file. So I can write file and this asterisk here, and it will work since it's the only file here that starts with file. It's like an autocomplete to make an example here. For example, I cannot just use cd dir here because we have 2 directories that start with dir. Oh, sorry. We have to actually write the full name here. But say I wanted to go into a new directory. Let's call something different. Now I can just go ahead and do this, and it will work since there is no confusion for this command. You have to just make certain that you have no ambiguity when you use the wildcard. For example, you can use it to have to type less when you're trying to move to a certain folder or directory. You can use it to delete many files at the same time. There are many, many uses for the wildcard. Now, why should I use the terminal? Isn't it easier to just make a file in my file explorer? Just well, that's what probably most of you are used to right now. But using the terminal is way faster. Now, it might seem like it's really slow having to type all of this stuff and really not intuitive, but you will get used to it as you use it more, and it is really efficient. You can also even write many commands. For example, I can make a new directory, and inside this directory, I'm gonna make a file, for example, a Python file. And now I have made these two new files in the same command. We can, for example, write a small Python script that will execute many, many different commands and just execute it directly from the terminal with, for example, like this file. This is empty, so it won't do anything, but you can execute code directly from the terminal. You can do many, many things, and it is extremely efficient. There's also many programs that can only run in a terminal. I actually have a cute example here. I have a program that I found in GitHub that it's a Pomodoro timer that works on the terminal. You can just get it to work. It's really cute. And it's a terminal program. You can only run it through a terminal. Now that you are going into this, you're gonna learn a lot of Python in this course. It's important that you can keep track of what you're changing in a Python file and that you can share that work with other people. Eventually, if you keep going through this route in STEM, you will collaborate with other persons. So it's important that we can have some record of what of the work we're doing, what changes are we making, and that's what Git is for. Git is a program created by Linus Torvalds, the creator of Linux, and it's a version control program. And it helps us keep track of whatever changes we are making in a bunch of files and makes everything extremely tidy for us. Now, the the a group of files that we're keeping track of is called a repository. And we have some special commands that are from Git to do this. I'm going to show you how to use this, but first let's go over them. To initialize a repository and actually get Git going, we use git init. And then we are supposed to add our files. We might want to keep track of most of our files. Maybe we want to ignore some temporary files that we don't care about. So we use git add and git reset to add and remove files from this tracking system. And finally, when we are happy with what we're adding, we use git commit to just say, I did some changes and here are the changes. Let's go ahead here. Oh, I went one too far. Okay, now we use git init. You can ignore the yellow stuff, but it says initialize empty git repository. Now actually we can just list here with hidden files and we see that there's a .git directory. We can actually go inside and see what's there. There's a bunch of weird things here, some files, some folders, and you shouldn't tinker with this. It's really not necessary to touch it. It's just Git's internal files to keep track of everything. But it's to show that it is here and it is keeping track of our stuff. Now we can say git add. Say I want to add all of the files that I've been working on here. So I'm gonna git add everything with our wildcard. I didn't add this in the slides, but you use git status to see what files you're actually adding. And we have our 2 copies of file 2, our Python file, and we don't have our hidden file. We could actually add it, I think. There we go. Now we just want to commit. Oh. The commit, the point of it is to say, I work on some files, I did some changes, and I'm gonna tell you what those changes were now. Added for new files. You're supposed to be way more descriptive than this in a real commit if you're working in a project with other people. But since this is just for me, I'm gonna just go ahead and do this. Now we have these changes. You might think that this is like really redundant. Like, I know I'm adding files. Why should I have to tell Git about it? But the cool thing about Git is that it lets you go back to previous versions of your work. Say you were working on some code and something broke, and now it's buggy, and you already saved, so you don't remember exactly what you changed, or maybe you deleted something, you added way too much code. You can tell Git, hey, bring me back to a previous version, and now you're back to a working version and can see exactly what changed. It tells you exactly what lines of code changed, what files were added, deleted, so it's really, really helpful. Now, keeping track of files for yourself is great, but the real power of this is for collaboration with other persons. There are many public repositories in GitHub or GitLab where you can download programs, you can see open source code from other people, you can work with others through GitHub. It allows you to collaborate really easily and for everyone to have a copy of the code that they can work in without interfering with each other. And there's many much more functions with GitHub and Git, but this is just a really, really basic introduction. I recommend that you watch some videos if you have the time. It can get complicated, but the basics is just you add a file, you commit, and then you upload it if you want to GitHub with the command git push, which I'm not going to show you right now because most of you, I'm guessing, don't have a GitHub or GitLab account. Now, for homework for today, I'm actually gonna provide a file with this so you don't have to write this down. But I want you to create some directories, add some files with some content in them, using the commands we've seen today, and then take a screenshot of your terminal and upload it to the shared drive that they're gonna share later. And I'm also gonna provide the link to the software carpentry course so that you can get even some more practice. In reality, this might seem very overwhelming, but you just have to get used to it. I've been using Linux as my mainly operating system for almost a year, and it really does get easier the more you do it. So don't be nervous if you have to check your notes or if this seems really inefficient or you forget how to do it. Just keep practicing. I'm also asking you to create a GitHub account. If you already have one, you don't need to make a new one. I just want you to see how does GitHub work. And then you are going to make a local repository, just like I showed you right now. Initialize a repo, add some files, and then commit it. If you have any questions, if you actually want to learn how to upload to GitHub, it's a little bit more complicated, but you can contact me and I can show you. And that will be all from me today. I hope it was clear. I don't know if any of you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Alexandra. Uh, so we do have some time for questions. Uh, Feel free to type it in the chat or unmute yourself. So Maria and I have been answering questions in the background, so I think most of them have been addressed. So there are a couple questions. So what is the meaning for a repository?
I didn't actually know the strict true definition, but it's like a group of files and content that you are like saying this is a project, this is something I'm working on. You can have, for example, actually, let me show you. I have here some of my. I have a repo here from a course in my uni that is like computational physics stuff. This is where we will upload our homework. We have some Julia files. I don't know if you know the Julia language. It's nice. So it's like just saying, oh, we have this repo here that is a course, and we have a group of files, and that's a repository. I actually have even some a repository that's just some here. For a project, I did a web page. So I have like HTML, some Julia code for some simulations. It's just to say this is a project. This group of files is a project and it's a repository.
So there's a question about homework and where to submit them. I can answer that. So the homework will be provided later today through an email, along with a Google Drive, a shared Google Drive, for which you can upload your completed homework. So look out for an email later today.
Yes, the instructions will, you don't need to write this down. I will send them in a file so you have everything you need. You don't need to write this.
All right. Maybe we should move on to the next session. Thank you so much, Adriana. That was, super very informative. Now moving on to talking about research papers or science papers with Maria. So Maria is a graduate student at the University of Hawaii too. And Maria recently defended her thesis, so she's now Dr. Maria Vincent. Congratulations, Maria. Uh, Now passing on to you for the next session.
Hi, my name is Maria. Thanks for the introduction, Faye. So before I begin, I would like to just get a sense of how many of you have read or tried reading a research paper. And by research paper, I don't necessarily mean a journal article, but it can be anything research related. It can be it can be like a blog style article on a paper, or it can be a page of someone's thesis or anything of that sort, just so that I get an idea of what you're reading. So like maybe a show of hands on Zoom on like how many of you have read papers. Yeah, and yes, Astrobyte articles totally count for my question. Okay, cool. That's a lot of you. That's actually amazing because I did not read a lot of research papers when I was an undergrad, and yet I managed to almost finish grad school. So you're far ahead than where I am, than where I was in your career level. Okay, so in today's presentation, let me share my screen. Uh, um, okay, Google. Um, can you see my screen?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
Okay, so in today's presentation, I'm going to talk about how to read papers and not just reading, not just the reading part, but also like selecting and to kind of try to digest what the paper is telling you. So the first question is, where can you find newly published papers? On an average, as far as I've seen in astronomy alone, or I would say physics and astronomy broadly, there's like about 20 to 30 papers that are coming out every single day. Now, not all of these papers are published journal articles. Some of them are what we call preprints. So the versions that were just submitted to the journal but are not printed out yet. Um, or they are papers that, where people talk about ideas that are not fully fleshed out, but they want to like eventually publish it. Or there can be papers that are just talking about something within the field, but not super research related. It can be talking about a social issue in the field. It can be talking about dealing with some organizational thing. It could be a summary of a conference or something like that. Or on April Fools, the scientific community likes to come around and put on April Fool joke papers, which are really fun to read. But also you need to like know well enough that these are joke papers because some of them are very close to sounding like actual papers. Anyways, the one-stop shop for all your papers is archive.org. As the name suggests, it is an archive of papers and goes all the way back to many, many years ago. This is not just for astronomy. They have papers in 8 different categories: physics, math, CS, biology, finance, statistics, engineering, data science, economics. The papers that we need for astronomy are in the Astro PH column, which is the physics category of these papers. Sometimes some of these astronomy papers also make it to math and CS. But that depends on how the paper is categorized. You can categorize your paper in multiple categories. So under physics, there are multiple categories that talk about different parts of physics and different parts of astronomy. For example, what I mostly read comes under the Earth and astrophysics category. There's like the cosmology category, there's a high energy astrophysics category. But basically, it is a very well fleshed out classification system and has all your papers in there. For your purposes, let's just focus on paper. We just need to focus on papers on the physics category. Now, as it sounds, as archive itself can be very daunting with so many of these different papers. There is an additional system called the Astrophysics Data System, ADS for short, and that indexes published journal literature and preprints specifically in astrophysics. So let's say you want to look at a paper by a certain author or a paper about a certain object or in a certain field or in a certain subsection of astronomy. The easiest for sometimes the easiest way to go about it is using ADS, where you can just type in a key term like the name of the author or oh, actually, wait, instead of me talking about it, I can totally show you. So ADS. So this is what the ADS homepage looks like. You can type in the name of an author, or you can type in the name of an object. Or if you know that you're looking for a paper that came out in the last 1 year, you can limit the publication date. Or if you know the name of the title, if you know the name of the paper itself, you can type it here. Or if you just know like a few keywords, you can go about here. So for example, I work in a subsection of astronomy called adaptive optics, which deals with technology to correct for wave aberrations in your light due to atmosphere. So I want to look up a paper in adaptive optics, so I'm going to type that over here. I say small, but it's not a super small field. It's grown really big in the last 20 years. So I type in adaptive optics and I get all these recent papers in adaptive optics. Now let's say I'm looking for a paper by Olivier Guillaume, for example, and I know like he wrote the paper, so I can select him as the author, limit to, and then I want to see a paper that came out in the last 2 years, so I can limit my results from 2004 to 2006, and voila. And let's say the paper that I want to read is this one right here. Well, no, that actually defeats the purpose. Or maybe this one right here. So if I click on this, I can see the abstract of the paper. I can see where this paper has come out. So for example, this was a conference talk. So this is the only link that exists. If this was an actual paper, then let me see. Let me go to something that I know is an actual paper. Oops, something's wrong. let me try again. Adaptive optics, search. This limit to 2004. Oh, so 2024, sorry. And okay. Yeah, this I know is a paper because I am also on this paper. Ta-da! So here you can see the paper, the preprint version, which is on archive.org, or the actual final published version, which is an IOP. In 99% of the time, the preprint version and the final published version is pretty much the same because every time you submit your paper to a journal, you get reviews and feedback and changes to make, and you make those changes. Some people, if they're extremely conservative about who they share their information with, they just use it. They just publish their paper they just put their paper on archive once it's published. But some people who are competing with other groups and they want to show that they were the first to discover something, they would immediately put it on archive and make a note that it has already been submitted. And such papers that deal with a very big discovery, like for example, in the recent case of JWST work, there's been a lot of planets. There's been a lot of different new star systems and different features of planets that have been discovered. So people have been competing and putting out papers like crazy. Like there are like at least two examples I can think of where there were three different groups that published their findings on the same day. So we had three papers on that one single object on the same day on archive. So in that case, if you're publishing papers in a journal, why would you put it in two places? Why would you put it on the journal and on archive? Mainly because it's this word that I want to draw your attention to. Okay, I don't think that word made it to my final version, but basically, archive is open access, meaning everything on archive is free. For actual journals, those are all paid. You need to subscribe to the journal to read the papers they present there, or you can pay per article. Most universities already have their subscription, so you should be able to access papers on those journals through your university library, or you can ask the help of a professor in your department who would have some other way of getting papers from there. But obviously, like if you're a freelance, if you're an independent researcher, if you're between universities or you're just about to start university and want to read a paper, then it is not ideal because journal papers are very expensive. It's expensive for both people reading them and also for people publishing papers. So if I have to submit a paper to a journal, I have to pay extra fees just to make sure that people can read the work that I did, and it can also be, and for a higher fee, it can be made free to every reader. Then that question, then that brings, that might lead to another question in your mind. Do we get paid for writing papers? Are we like book writers who get paid for every book that's sold? Absolutely not. We do not make money out of this. We lose money on this. Yet we have to do this to make sure our science is available to the public through a very reputable and trustworthy source. The main reason we publish papers is so that people can read our work, and also most journals, well, not all of them, I would say about 50% of the journals out there are peer reviewed, meaning other experts in your field review your papers and make sure your work is foolproof before it is given to the public. But if you want to read these papers for free, archive is where you go. ADS is a system you use to index and go through papers in the last so and so years by a certain author to classify and look at papers. All right, so that was about archive and ADS. So now I told you how to look for papers. Now, how do you start reading a paper? That is a very important question to answer because there's really no class that teaches you how to read a paper. And mind you, this is how I personally think about approaching a paper. Every person has their own way of doing it. So in case whatever method that I tell you doesn't work out for you, you should definitely reach out to other people and see what works out for them. So as I said, where to start depends on why you've chosen to read that paper in the first place. Regardless of what your intention is, your expertise level is, always start with the abstract because that tells you exactly what's going on in the paper. It tells you what the paper is about, what they do in their work, what the final result is, what the overall conclusion is, what the big picture idea is. So reading with the abstract will tell you if you're on the right paper so that you don't waste the next hour or a couple of hours reading the wrong paper. So read the abstract to make sure this is exactly what you're looking for. If you're new to the field, always start with the introduction because a good paper will always introduce you to the field, assuming you have some background astronomy knowledge. So, for example, if it's a paper about exoplanets, well, let's say it is the paper deals with directly imaging an exoplanet. It usually talks about a little bit about how direct imaging works, why people directly image exoplanets, what information we already have from previous directly exoplanets, and eventually builds to the target that you need to look at. So a good paper always has the introduction, always covers everything you need to know in the introduction. And in case you need further information, they usually cite, not usually, they have to cite other papers that talk about the basics of the instrument, of the object, or even of the field in some cases. So you can look at the papers they have cited and start with the same process. Read the abstract, read the introduction. Now let's say you've already deep dived, you're in your field, you're comfortable, and you are looking for a specific result. You're trying to see if the so and so paper has the result that you're looking for, or they have, or if their work on this object has already found the results that you were interested in. So you can skip the introduction part, read the abstract to make sure you're looking at the right paper, and then you can just go through the figures. Figures in astronomy papers, as far as I've seen, they're a very good fast visual guide to what the paper tells you. It has plots, there might be diagrams, there could be schematics, and the captions are usually detailed, which is basically a summary of what the figure is showing you, and they usually tie into references in the rest of the paper. So you can look at the figure, first see if it tells what result you need to know, and if you need further explanation, just look at the caption and follow it back to the section of the paper that figure is relevant to. Now, let's say you're looking at that paper because you are redoing something that they did. Maybe you're observing using the same instrument, or if it's an experiment, you're conducting the same experiment in the same lab that they did, or you're using a mathematical algorithm that paper used for maybe it's the same object or something else. In that case, start with the method section to see what exactly they did. I would say out of all the papers that I read, only 70% of them actually do a good job of talking about what exactly they did in terms of observing or observing modes or even like the mathematical guide. Mostly because at this point, we are far enough in astronomy that everybody's replicating somebody else's methods. When it comes to using an instrument or using a telescope or using a data processing algorithm. So in those cases, maybe the method section is not fully conclusive, but they would always be citing other papers that introduce these techniques or talk about those techniques in more detail. So you can look at the method section, take what you need from it, and if it's not up to if it does not give you all the information you need, look at the papers they cite, or you can always contact the author of the paper and they will always be happy to help you. The contact information of the author is usually on page 1, their email, or you can just Google their name and institution and you should be able to find them. Now, let's say you're pressed for time. You have to read this paper right before a meeting, or you're talking to a potential advisor. You need to know their work. So you read their last couple of papers and you only have like 1 hour to read 5 papers. Read the conclusion summary. That usually tells you everything you need to know about that paper. And then if there is a point in the conclusion or summary that stands out to you, then you can go back and read the point that's relevant to it. I usually do this when I'm looking for papers, when I'm trying to make a list of objects that I want to observe. So that leads me to section 3, how to choose what papers to read. I told you about how to start reading papers and where to find them, I told you about where to find papers, how to start reading papers. Now, how do you even choose a paper to read? So there are, at least as far as I can think of, there are 3 entry points. One is if you're looking at a particular object, and that is my usual entry point into reading a paper. I'm not exactly very good at keeping up with recent updates in my own field, which is pretty bad, to be honest. I usually hear about papers from my colleagues, or maybe a friend of mine who's in my same field has written a paper and I want to read that. So that's like word of mouth, which is what everything, like a lot of different fields work, not just sciences, but also humanities and even news in general. But these were the 3 things that I thought was good ways to get into to motivate yourself to start reading papers. So one is if you're interested in an object, let's say there's a planet or like I don't know the solar system like Jupiter that you want to read about, or there's a particular disk like PDS 70, which is a very famous system where you have a circumstellar disk and a planet forming in it. If you're motivated by an object, you can look for it on Sinbad. Sinbad is well, I don't know if library is the right term. Okay, it's a database. It is a database that has all the information you need about an object that has already been imaged or detected or studied, and it has every information under the sun about that object, really. So let me show you Sinbad real quick. Maybe it is a different topic for a different presentation, but I think it's a little relevant what I'm saying. So this isn't bad. You can query by the name of the object, or if you know its exact coordinates in sky, you can use it. For this, I'm going to use a basic query. So like it gives you an example, Sirius, which is one of the brightest stars in the sky. So I'm looking at Sirius. It tells me all of the technical information about Sirius. It gives me an image of Sirius. And then it gives me, yeah, all the other different names it's known by. And in the references section, it gives me the list of papers about Sirius or papers that mention Sirius. So, this is like the brightest object of the night sky, besides the moon, planets, of course. And obviously there's like thousands of papers about this. I just want to read something that has came out in the last year. So I write 2026 to current year and display, and it displays all the papers that deal with Sirius or mention Sirius. Sirius may not be the subject of the paper, but that star has made its way into these papers. And I can click the link, I can read the abstract, and then decide if I want to read the paper or not. It gives you a link on the ADS database, or it can give you the full paper as well. So this is the reason I showed you this is because this is one way you can get into reading papers. Look at an object and read what the look. If you're looking at an object, you can see the list of papers on that object and then read it. The other way to get into paper reading is if you're motivated by a topic, idea, or claim. Let's say you are very new to astronomy and you are interested in pursuing research in in black holes in or supermassive black holes in the center of galaxy. There are, or actually, no, that is a different point. Sorry, I did not rehearse the presentation, so I just got ahead of myself. Okay, so if you're motivated by an idea or topic or claim, AI is super helpful in this nowadays. I have a different section on how to use AI, but basically, if you use AI tools like Claude or ChatGPT, I personally prefer Claude for this, because Claude has always given me accurate results. ChatGPT has not. Claude or these AI tools in general, they can give you a surface literature context. So for example, like let's say I have this idea. I'm looking at a supermassive black hole. I want to measure the mass of the black hole, but I don't have enough information. But I want to know for what other black holes this has been done. So I give Claude this prompt or ChatGPT this prompt, and I ask it for enough information. I tell it like, give me archive or ADS links to the papers that describe how this has been done in the past. And you need to make sure you say that because otherwise AI, being as dumb as it can be sometimes, it can make up papers, it can make up theories and give you wrong information. But if you ask it for proper archive or ADS links, then you can click them and verify those papers actually exist. But AI tools have been amazingly helpful in giving you a literature context on your idea or claim. How did people do this before AI? Using ADS and Google Scholar, where they would type out keywords and look for papers. That can take lots and lots of time. And recently, when I wrote my thesis under a very, very short time scale, this actually worked for me. The third point is what I was trying to say earlier. If you vibe read a subfield, if you want to know what that subfield is about, if you're new to that subfield, look for review papers. You can look at it, you can look up the field in ADS or archive. Especially archive is a little bit more useful to us because it has different tags for different types of papers. And if they have the tag review, that's usually a review paper. In astronomy, a very good source for this is the journal Annual Reviews in Astronomy and Astrophysics. They do annual reviews on pretty much most fields in astronomy, include like from, from like cosmology, where it talks about the expansion and the beginning of the universe, to things as fundamental as solar system science, formation of planets, or stellar evolution. So review papers are written at a level which anyone with a basic knowledge of astronomy can understand because it's meant for a wider audience to understand where that field is, where it is headed, and if they want to start doing research in that field, what they should be focusing on. ADS and Archive are very good resources for these review papers. And again, AI can also give you review papers, but make sure you ask them for the actual links. So speaking of AI tools that can help in reading papers. So there are three that I've been able to point you out to. I haven't used Scholar mostly because it is a paid subscription. I've used SciSummary and TLDR this. What these AI tools help you is if you give it an archive link, or I think Scholar also takes an ADS links. Again, I'm not super sure, but you need to look into it. But I have heard people using it and having a good time. These AI tools basically they summarize papers for you, they can break down jargon, they can make papers easier to read. So that way, especially if you're new in the field or if you're in a time crunch and you just need surface level context, but more than just for the summary or conclusion can give you, you can use these tools to help you figure out what's going on in that paper. And you can also use traditional AI tools. If you uploaded a paper, you can ask it to break down the jargon for you, ask it questions like you're talking to a tutor, and it can ask it to give you additional context on these papers. You can use, I personally prefer Claude. ChatGPT also works. The only reason I don't recommend ChatGPT is because if you want to do additional data analysis, then ChatGPT isn't great because it's more of an NLP. It is just based on text and reading things and literature. It's good for helping down jargon in papers, but not if you want to do additional data-driven analysis, ChatGPT can start breaking down. Although the new models are actually really good, but you also need to have paid plans for that. So if you want to use something that's free and something that gives you nice results, you can use Claude, which again is also paid, but I personally think it works better than ChatGPT. But again, it's all preferences. It's up to what you want. But if you want to just read papers using existing tools that are free or, gives you a limited free use per day, I personally recommend SciSummary or tldrthis.com. There's so many out there. Reddit has a lot of discussion between like grad students and undergrads that talk about AI tools to help you read papers. You should follow those threads and talk to other people and see what works best for everyone. Now, papers tend to be really technical, especially if you're talking about instrumentation papers. Sometimes you need even an engineering degree to understand them. Or sometimes science papers can get too mathy, and you may not have a math background to understand those astronomy papers. Or, as I said, you might be new to the field and you're reading the papers to get an understanding of what you want to do. So the question is, are there less technical versions of papers besides the AI tools I talked to you about? Yes. I might be okay, that the text is wrong. Let me quickly type up an explanation and talk to you about it. So Astrobytes is a daily paper summary web-based journal. And I'm the only reason I'm biased is because I'm an Astrobytes author myself, but I promise you, everybody in undergraduate astronomy swears by this website. So we do several things. We do daily paper summaries where we like an author who's assigned to write that day, we look up at a paper on archive and write a summary of it. And when we write a summary, we make sure we break down jargon, we explain background context, we give you lots of links to simpler websites that give you background context, and then we talk about the results of the paper. We do daily paper summaries. We occasionally do field reviews on the field. So remember I told you about bigger journals like annual reviews in astronomy and astrophysics. You don't have to go all the way to that. If you need a simple background review, we do reviews on the field. We do interviews of people in the field. And if you're interested in working with a astronomer or like a researcher, sometimes if they're interviewed and if their interview is there, that might be a good way for you to get to know them. We do conference coverages. So we kind of like work like a newspaper in that sense, where when there's a big conference happening in astronomy, we usually go to conferences and we give you summaries and updates on new results. Sometimes new instruments, some big new discovery is announced at such a conference. So we kind of give you a quick first look on what that big result is. So astrobytes.org, very helpful tool. And in case you're not able to take notes, I will make sure that these slides get to you so that you have access to all these links. And the last thing I'd like to talk to you about is book club for papers. So you know how book clubs work. A bunch of you get together reading the same book, and as you finish a chapter or two, you discuss on what you got out of the chapter. We can have similar book clubs for papers, and a lot of university departments have that system in place. So you can have journal clubs where it's kind of like a news forum, but instead of headlines, you discuss new papers. So a lot of institutes have this for students specifically, or sometimes department-wide. So the department that Faye and I are a part of, we do a daily journal club that runs for 30 minutes where we discuss two new papers in the field, sometimes written by someone in our department or just someone in general. We present those papers and we go through the major points, and that way you know what's going on in your field or some other field in astronomy. It's a great way to start the day. Faye does it very regularly. I have been super irregular about it. So yeah, please don't use me as a role model. I'm not really good at so many of these things. There are online tools that help you track and surface new papers for your group. So if you're because sometimes it's when you're doing a journal club for papers at a rate where there are 20 to 30 papers coming out every single day, you need a way to keep track of what's been discussed, what can be discussed, what are things that you're interested in. Benti Fields is a very good tool for that, where on Benti Fields you can start up a forum for your own group and then list the papers that you're interested in. Pentifields also has AI tools that learn the papers that you're interested in based on the thumbs up and thumbs down you give. So as you train the model, it begins suggesting papers that you're interested in based on the field you work in. If you don't have a journal club at your institution, always feel free to start one, especially an undergrad-oriented club would be very helpful so that people with a similar level of understanding in the field can come together and discuss papers. And if you talk to a senior researcher like a graduate student or a postdoc, they will be super happy to help you navigate this. You can have online clubs in case you're a freelance researcher not currently affiliated with the university, or you want to do something over the summer, but you guys are not at college, you can do an online club. So there's a platform called AlphaCive, which takes in papers from archive, but make it more discussion style, where you can read a paper from archive, you can annotate it live, and it has a Reddit style forum where you can ask people questions or directly contact the author and ask questions. The only reason I haven't linked it over here is because I haven't used it myself enough to tell you how it works. I've only used it for the annotate part, not the discuss part. But it is pretty useful because it lets you subscribe to papers and mark what fields you're interested in. So sometimes if there's like a big or a semi-big paper in your field, it usually sends you an email. And depending on how regularly you want emails, it can give you blasts on forums that are happening or more papers in your field if you're interested. But point is, you can have Reddit style online clubs for this, or even start a Reddit sub forum for black hole mass determination if it doesn't exist. Then, of course, there's microblogging. So a lot of people in astronomy were obsessed with Twitter at some point, but after the whole Twitter to X transition, a lot of them migrated to Blue Sky. Blue Sky has been the go-to in the astronomy community. So many young astronomers are on there. So if you're reading a paper and you have a question and you just want to throw that question out to the wider astronomy field, but you want to do it in an informal setting, microblogging exists. And again, anytime, if you want to solo read a paper, but you have a bunch of questions, feel free to email the authors. They will be more than happy to help you. If they're not happy to help you, it's either because they're super busy or maybe they just don't like helping a lot of people, which is not great. But I promise you, 70% of the time, we do have time on our hands to help you understand our paper. And we always appreciate questions because that just shows how many people are interested in our paper. And if you end up going to conferences or meetings or workshops in your field, most of the people who write the papers that you read are going to be there, so you can meet them directly and ask them questions. So that's all I have. I'm going to quickly show you my assignment for you is, and then we can go to Q&A. So I would ask your assignment is to just read one paper at two different levels. So start by going to Astrobytes, look for a paper article that's tagged under daily paper summary, and read the basic less jargony version of that paper for a beginner level explanation. At the top of the Astrobytes article, we link the open access, that is the archive version of that paper. So go to that. After reading the Astrobytes article, go to that and read the actual paper. And you can ask amongst yourself questions on the paper and make it an actual journal club type of discussion. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Maria. I guess we have a few minutes for quick questions. Feel free to unmute yourself now or type in the chat. There was a lot of good resources. I learned a lot too.
Okay, let's see. Like I'll just pick some questions that have not been answered. So there was this question, is it late for a 19-year-old student to get to know about this now? Absolutely not. As I said, I was 18 when I started undergrad, and I did not start reading papers actually until like my last year when I was working on my undergrad senior thesis. So I was like, what, 21 when that was happening? I think back then I had my advisor and the grad student I was working with send me papers. to read, that's a good way to start. So if you're interested in working with someone, you could ask them like, hey, can you send me some papers to read and get me introduced to the field? And if they would like to work with you, they are definitely going to send that because they want to prep you to work with them. So yeah, it's never too late to learn about these resources. There are a lot of students I know who don't start reading papers until starting grad school because that's when you do not real research, but you actually deep dive and do research on some very specific questions. So no, absolutely not. It's never too late. If you want, you can start with astrobites, start with the basic stuff, and then build up to reading papers eventually. Um, and yeah, I'm glad I've been able to like motivate people and give them ideas on how to get into reading papers. Okay. I actually want to know what we oh no, that is a thing about the workshop. Okay, how to be a successful author for research papers. When is a research paper called successful? How long does it take to write a paper? What are all the dependencies? So I don't know if there's a section on how to write papers, but to give you an overall look, how long? Okay, I'll start from the how long question. That really depends on you and what you're talking about the paper and how much data the paper is presenting. So sometimes there are papers that are super simple and all they show is like, hey, I looked at 3 different objects using this telescope. Here are the images. And that's literally all the paper tells you. And they may tell you like, oh, look at this image. There is a spiral. Oh my God, look at this image. There's like filaments coming out of it. Maybe there's an outburst happening. Now, papers at that level, because I mean, in this day and age, when there's so many discoveries and so much analysis going on, papers at that level usually follow observation campaigns that have been running for years, trying to image something that has never been imaged before. So if you include the time it takes to observe those objects, so yeah, okay, actually, let me break this down to you. A final published paper has obviously an immense amount of work behind it. There's the work that starts with writing the proposal to get money for your project. If it relies on observing, there's the time that goes into writing the proposal to ask for time on a telescope. There's the observing time. There's the data analysis time. There is the time that takes you to write the paper. There's the time that it takes you to meet with your collaborators, discuss how to do your analysis. There's a time between submitting the paper, getting feedback from the reviewers, and making those changes and sending it back to them. My first paper. Oh, I think someone's unmuted. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Now it's fine. Yeah. So my first paper, which was basically my first year project, my first year project started in January of 2022, and I ended up publishing that work April of 2024. So it took a little over 2 years. One of the papers that my friends did when he graduated, that relied on observations from 6 years ago. He didn't do those observations, someone else did. But so the time I would say he spent on that paper alone was a year. But if you count the time from, people collecting data for the paper, that was 6 years. So that's how long it can take to write a paper. It really depends on you and how much data you're including. When is a research paper called successful? I think it really depends on who you ask. I think a research paper is successful if it there are two things. Is the research successful or the paper successful? Because sometimes the research itself may have ended in a failure. Like they might start pursuing a question, but they realize like their idea was wrong. They didn't get a lot of data. But the paper that describes that whole process can be so beautiful that it's complete, and I personally would call it successful. So if you're talking about how is a paper successful, is if it hits all the main points. If it describes the introduction, if it introduces you to the work very well, if it describes in great detail what the method was, what the observing technique was, what the math was. If the results are explained in a way it's foolproof and you don't have any vague, I mean, obviously every research paper ends with open questions, but it shouldn't be that when you read the paper, you find mistakes, you find loopholes or anything like that. How to be a successful author? I am pretty sure a lot of people still cannot answer this question. I think with most things, to be a successful author, you just have to keep writing and reading more papers.
So
So
Maria, I
yeah,
do have to go.
yes,
Maybe we should wrap up here and
yeah,
save additional questions for later.
yes. Yeah, you can always email questions to me or you can email questions on the group and yeah, we will answer them.